Minsforum, I've covered them now for a while. They're mini PCs and their recent tablet too as well, but they have a sub-brand which is called AtomMan, and this is the first of probably many mini PCs from this brand, and it's called the X7 Ti. Now it is a high-end mini PC. It does have a 4-inch touchscreen which you can use to control the power levels and see various information on your system stats. For example, the GPU load temperatures, CPU temperatures as well. Now it is powered by the Core Ultra 9185H that has 16 cores, turbos at a maximum of 5.1 gigahertz. It has USB 4, and that is 2 ports, Type-C ports, and even Oculink. So if you're going to run an external GPU, I happen to have one, especially just for this video I got it, an RTX 4090. And I'll be covering it very briefly, what it's like and what kind of performance differences we get running Oculink versus, say, Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4. And Minsforum did send this, which is their new portable monitor. It has a touch screen. It can run up to 165 Hertz and it's 1440p, 400 nits brightness. Now, it is a long video because I've got a lot of ground to cover here, so there are chapters. This is what you'll find included. We have an instruction manual, user manual there. The tips, this is just to tell you that if you do replace the RAM or the SSD, then the boot time is going to be a lot longer. We get our power cable, that'll depend on the region, of course, an HDMI cable. This is the brace, the bracket to support the mini PC, and then our power supply, which is nice and small, but it is powerful, 120 watts. So this mini PC has plenty of ports. We've got a CMOS reset here, 2 Type A's 3.2s, USB 4.0 or Thunderbolt 4, being Intel, 3.5mm with mic support there, so your audio jack, a intake vent here. Along the back, very good when it comes to connectivity. So 2 5 gigabit LAN ports. Now they are Realtek. The wireless is Wi-Fi 7, which is from Intel, another USB 4, Oculink. So if you're going to be using external GPUs, I'll be testing this later in the video. It's very good for that because we get, in theory, up to 63 gigabits per second versus Thunderbolt 4, USB 4, which is 40 gigabits per second. So there's a lot more bandwidth there, which the cards do need. DisplayPort that can handle 4K 120 Hertz. HDMI 2.1, and I've tested it out with 4K 120 Hz as well. No issues. Barrel connector, good to see they used a standard barrel connector here, not some weird magnetic connector like other brands do. Another USB Type A 3.2 and a USB 2 port there. So good for ports. And we even get this. This is a full-size SD card reader. Good to have on a mini PC. Exit vents, all the hot air is going to be pushed out here. The fan noise and thermals will be covered in this video. Our power on button with a LED behind it. This is the little switch there for the shutter for the webcam. Here is a sample of the X7 Ti's webcam. So it's 1080p, 30 frames per second, and I'm using the inbuilt dual array microphones that it does have. Now there is a blue status LED that is on when the camera is on. And remember, we have that switch at the top, which will slide across the shutter, disable the webcam if you are worried about privacy. And then the underside of it, so intake vent right here, this is for the mount, and you have these rubber feet, which I've already removed. The rubber feet right here, they were a pain to remove, to pry off. I had to use a pry tool, didn't want to damage the plastics, but they came off a lot harder than they typically normally do. So below those rubber feet, you'll find those 4 screws. They're gone, just to speed up things here with the video. A little gap here for us to pry this off, so when you lift that up, you can easily put it to one side. And I recommend that you put it over to the right side here because there is this ribbon. Okay, you don't want to damage that. You can unplug it down here or pull the tape off, and I believe maybe unplug it here too as well. So there are 6 screws here and 6 here, which again I've already removed. So 12 little tiny screws we need to take off to remove the bracket here that holds the fan in place. So fan maintenance, straight away you can access that, clean it out with dust. You can pull it right off right now. And if any dust does end up building up in the fins right here, well, you'll be able to blow that out, vacuum it out, clean it out, whatever. You can see the good and the bad. So we have 3 copper thermal transfer pipes here. So cooling looks to be quite potent for this particular chipset, our Ultra 9185H. heatsink here for the SSD, PCIe 4.0. Now, that heatsink has a thermal pad that's stuck on it, and just a bit of force there, you can pry that off. And there is our heatsink, which is quite chunky, and my camera doesn't want to focus. There we go. You can see it's quite a good one, actually. But the bad, there's no spare SSD slot, but there is, well, one tiny one here, and it looks to be like a 42mm in length, or in fact, smaller than that, 30. So it's a very small, tiny one, not a common size. So really, the upgradability is this one. So I could go from 1 terabyte up to 8 terabytes, or 4 terabytes, or 2 terabytes, something with our PCIe 4.0 slot. So just a shame that there is no room for another one. But the RAM, at least, you can see it has these heat spreaders on both of the SODIMM modules there. So it's DDR5, and it's 5600 megatransfers, the speed of them. So you can upgrade the RAM easily. Wi-Fi card, well, I believe, I can't see where it is unless it's under this. I believe it's soldered onto the motherboard, so not upgradable, just the SSD and the RAM. But a real shame that we have no room for a 2.5-inch drive or another standard size PCIe 4.0 SSD. Here we are in the BIOS setup screen. So if you are going to be running an external GPU via Oculink, this is a must. You need to go into this particular menu here, go to Advanced, find Onboard Devices settings, and then make sure you change this, which I believe is on auto, or the IGFX, which stands for integrated. You want to put that onto HG, which I have set. Now, I couldn't get my Oculink GPU to work until that was enabled. So that was holding me back. I was almost ripping my hair out trying out different Oculink boards and setups, but I needed to have that enabled there. The other is power limits. You may wish to up this or lower it depending on what your preferences are. So go down here to the power and performance, which is under advanced. Click here. I have it set to performance mode, 65 watts for our power limit 1 and 2. The default is balance, which is 54 and then 60 watts. And you can also manually put in whatever you want. Now, I wouldn't really go over, I think about 75 or 70 would be the limit. You can change that there. It might help the integrated graphics. So those are the interesting settings. There is, unfortunately, while there is quite a bit in here, there is nothing for allocating more RAM dedicated, that is, to the Intel Arc graphics. There is this, however, which is the fan mode. Now, by default, it's on balance, which seems to do a pretty good job keeping it quiet, but you do hear it ramp up a little bit. Performance, a little bit louder, but it will do as it says. Performance, help, just lower those thermals, lets it turbo a little more. So I'm going to keep it on the performance. So this is the change I've made here. Performance to the power limit and performance to our fan profiles. You can then go along and save and exit, boot order and whatnot. If you're going to be booting Linux, you'll find that through either here or the first menu. But let's go over now into Windows. So it does ship here with Windows 11 Home. And of course, you're going to need to run the updates and whatnot. And is it just me, or is Windows getting increasingly bloated and all sorts of rubbish? Like now you got Copilot in the right corner there, you have this thing pop up. So there's a lot of things I need to clean up with Windows, but no bloatware from them themselves. AtomMan, there's nothing, okay? There's no additional software or anything. So we have facial recognition there with the webcam that's built in, fingerprint reader with that power button. So you can use Windows Hello to log in without a password. Realtek is the two 5 gigabit LAN ports there. Wi-Fi 7. Now, I don't have a Wi-Fi 7 router. They are super expensive, so I can't justify that purchase just yet for testing. But Wi-Fi 6E has been working fine for me, and using the LAN port at the moment, that does work just fine. No issues. I've had no instability problems, nothing like that. No crashes, no RAM overheating, no blue screens of death, nothing. Of course, you got the AI boost there with this particular chipset. Now, it does have 16 cores, 22 threads. Maximum turbo is 5.1 gigahertz. The Ultra 9 185H. It's a reasonably potent chipset. Everything is quick and snappy, really good. And benchmarks. I ran a few of those, and you can see here that impressive results. Not bad considering the size of it. what is on offer is very good. So this has a really good score for single core performance. I mean, I have seen a little bit better. In fact, previous generation probably was actually better for the single core. Multi-core score there is very good as well. Integrated graphics, this is where the big increase is with the new Arc graphics. So the new architecture, much better than Iris Xe they had before. Graphics score synthetic benchmark here, very good. This is where it beats out a AMD Radeon 780M. However, this is just with the synthetic benchmarks. Real gaming, you see later on, it's not actually better. So that was Timespy. This here is now Timespy if you decided to use an RTX 4090. Yes, very expensive GPU, but I wanted to see what it could do. So an impressive score here for Thunderbolt. This here was done with Thunderbolt, okay? You can see there, Thunderbolt 4 eGPU setup. And that is a really good score. 28,000 for the graphics score. And this is the difference here. Now, if you move over and use Oculink, well, it's 63 in theory gigabits per second. It won't be that full 63. Neither will Thunderbolt 4 at 40. That then takes it up to 32,000 points. So it went up there around about almost 4,000 points the score. So that is just synthetic benchmarks again. Later in gaming, I'll talk just briefly about that, the differences there. But you want to be gaming with an external GPU on Oculink, not Thunderbolt, for obvious reasons. Oh, and that's just a little bit more information on the chipset that I just talked about anyway. So it is their top end of the Ultra series right now. It's a very good chipset. I'm really happy with the performance. Everything is quick and snappy. The Kingston 1TB SSD, it's PCIe 4.0 spec. The speeds are not the quickest I've seen for this type of drive. Of course, you could swap this out, upgrade it. I showed the internals. It's not too difficult to get in there, but you have to remove quite a few components, and that is a little bit of a pain there. Now, the video playback is very good with this. No problems whatsoever. I'll play back this one, which is the Jellyfish file, high bit rate, and you see it's not dropping any frames per second at all. There's no stutter even at the start, 10-bit HEVC. And the Sony Swordsmith one, this is 4K 60 frames per second. And it shouldn't be dropping any frames per second at all. Sorry, I'll just mute that. No, it seems to be very smooth too. So video playback, including YouTube, that is all good. It just handles everything, the art graphics, with ease when it comes to video files. And this mini PC, as expected, can handle things that are a bit heavier than just kind of standard workloads. I won't be showing just spreadsheets and whatnot. This is Adobe Premiere Pro. And one of my own videos, the timeline is very quick. The art graphics certainly boosts this performance. Its media playback engine that it does have is quite good at handling these kind of files. And I don't really notice any lag. So this is a basic edit, but even with some transitions and a few different layers and whatnot, it's doing pretty well. Now, obviously, a dedicated GPU will still be a lot better, but for integrated graphics and this PC, I think it does well with 4K video. But let's have a look at the export time here now with the art graphics. I am using here the YouTube 4K preset. This is what I always test out with integrated graphics. It's a minute of footage only just to speed things up so we're not sitting through this whole long process here. Now I do have this up so we can take a look at what the art graphics is doing. It should be doing a lot of the work there with Intel QuickSync, which definitely favors export times with this. I don't imagine that this is going to take long at all. So you can see it's speeding right through this. Very, very quick indeed. And I would say it should be around about the 28-second mark, something like that, under 30 seconds, hopefully, considering all the power it does have with the Ultra 9 185H. So there we go. That was probably about 29 seconds. So my estimate there was pretty much spot on. So very quick to export. And you can see that it was the art graphics doing most of the work there. CPU just a little. It was idle. Well, up to about 50% only there. So very good for editing 4K video for a mini PC as small as this. Now, I'm not really against this if it wasn't going to push the price up. I believe it maybe is a little, but this touchscreen, would you really take advantage of it? Is it absolutely necessary? I personally don't think it is. Let me know in the comments. Do you think mini PCs should have this? So you can see the date, the time. Here is the most useful thing. I can adjust the performance mode. So we've got the performance option, the balanced, tapping here, and in energy saving. If you want that, you can do it all on the fly. It adjusts the fan profiles. So if you want it to be a little bit more quiet, put it in the energy saving. So that is the most useful part. Now, the touch screen in itself does work pretty well. Good. I don't really have any issues with it. You can see the RAM usage there. There's storage temperature, CPU temperature, and the current load of it there, and the information on the ARC graphics. Now, if you plug in an external GPU, it will still show the integrated, because that's the way it's set up. And there isn't, at the time of this video, any software to configure these little widgets and have them set to, say, something else. I hope that is coming in the future. Down here, our upload and download speeds, the current RPM of the fan. This is the brightness for the screen. We have volume controls. This is semi-useful, although I normally just use my keyboard shortcuts. And if you tap on that little USB icon, it lets you know the layout of the ports and everything, the front ports and then the rear ports of it. And if you tap in here, you get some different things. Like you got the clock. If you want to turn that on, you can go over and change the language in this screen. And if I go back again, we have the layout. You can set different layouts. So there is a few things on there. It is always on. I haven't found a way to turn it off if you didn't want it. But you can lower that brightness right down to almost not even see it. Okay, so that's one way to kind of get rid of it. So all up, it's a little useful widget screen, but I don't really think we needed this, but it does make it different from the competition. So Minsforum did send me this too, which is their portable monitor. Now, I didn't really expect much out of this, and I thought, you know, it probably won't be that amazing, it won't be that good, but I am surprised. It's a good portable monitor, and I'll tell you why, because the resolution is, I think, decent for the size. So 15.6 inches, that's a 16:9 aspect ratio. Resolution is 2560 by 1440. And the best part, 165 Hertz, although their advertising material does state 144 Hertz, and I'm just using a Type-C cable here from our mini PC to the portable monitor. Now, the touch accuracy does seem to be very good. It's fully laminated. It's a really nice screen. So it's like getting a screen for a quality laptop that you can get additional. Of course, you have to buy this as something they do sell separate, but I thought that I would just briefly feature it here in the video because it is actually quite nice, and I'm surprised by it. Now, brightness goes up to 400 nits. It's got a color accuracy of E2 HDR supported, and it's IPS, and also low blue light filter. Built-in speakers, they're only 1 watt each times 2, so there's 2 of them, and they sound pretty bad. They're not really that good. That's a downside to it. The speakers are, well, what can you expect from a portable monitor? They're not really that good, but I like the touch accuracy, the brightness of it, and that refresh rate. So it would even be good for gamers, gaming on it. In order to make this video not crazy long, I'm not focusing too much on the eGPU support. So that's via Oculink, and this is an RTX 4090 that I got specifically just for this video and a little bit of testing. It's a beast of a GPU, very expensive, but it's just to show you best case scenario really of what this can do. Now, I have a very cheap Oculink adapter here. Now, this I got off Amazon, and it simply just plugs into the PCIe slot of the GPU. You need to plug in a power supply, of course, and you've got your Oculink cable that you then plug in, and I had no trouble setting this up. It was just that BIOS setting that I showed you that you have to change. Make sure you set that, otherwise the Oculink port does not work. So that is one option for Oculink. External GPUs, you can use what a lot of people do, and that is Thunderbolt, and that will be USB 4. And this is a cheap adapter that I got quite some time ago from AliExpress. I'm sorry, I don't even know the name of it or anything, but it does kind of work well. And I'll very briefly show you the kind of differences you can expect between Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4 versus Oculink. And it is huge. It makes a big difference in games more than synthetic benchmarks. And now a benchmark that is an in-game one, and this is for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Now, I've set it to 1080p high preset. Now, I'm using the high preset because I'm testing that same preset at 4K later with an external GPU. So with the integrated graphics, you can see the result of the inbuilt benchmark is not wonderful. I wouldn't call this playable. You want to lower the resolution, probably down to 720p. However, testing out that MSI 4090 overclock version With Thunderbolt 4, this same exact test with the high preset, but now at 4K, got 89 frames per second with Thunderbolt 4 or USB 4, right? Then with the Oculink, same exact GPU, 138 frames per second. Massive difference. This is why if you're going to be gaming and you're using an external GPU, you really want to use an Oculink eGPU setup and not Thunderbolt 4 until we get Thunderbolt 5. So those results are huge, very different. This title here is called The Last Epoch, and it's not a very demanding game. I do have it set to 1080p because that's where I want to game, hopefully. I know that the Radeon 780M handles it quite a bit better at 1080p, and I have it on the low preset for the visuals, and it's doing okay, around 50 frames per second, but it does dip down. You can see now when there are a lot of enemies on screen, that frame rate is going to suffer a little bit. But overall, I consider for this style of game, this to be playable, and that was a huge lag just then. I don't know what caused that, but that doesn't normally happen. But overall, not too bad here. The Witcher 3, this is at 1080p on the low preset, is struggling. You can see at this resolution, not looking so great, down to 39 frames per second. It's got a lot of different light sources to render here, and the sun is rising up at the moment too. So not great. Let's try 720p. Now that is a big difference. Now at 720p, you can see it is getting 60 frames per second, which is really where you want to be gaming, especially with a style of games such as The Witcher 3. Rise of the Tomb Raider set to 1080p on the lowest preset. Let's run the in-game benchmark and see what the result is. Clearly there is a little bit of GPU throttling. It's not holding the top clock. Maybe if I increase the power limits, because certainly the thermals seem to be alright at the moment when gaming, I could improve that result there and hopefully lessen that throttling. So I topped out at 53 frames per second. I saw it pulling 40 watts, the ARC graphics, but it didn't always hold that top turbo, but not a bad result for 1080p on the lowest preset. Onto the thermals now. So it does thermal throttle according to HW Info. Gets up to 95 degrees Celsius. This is during all my stress tests and everything that I've been doing. And that's kind of, I hate to say it, but it's normal really for these kind of smaller form factor little mini PCs with these kind of chipsets. So it'll peak at that. But as you saw during the gaming, the thermals are pretty good. They're normally in like the mid kind of 60s, sometimes in the late 50s, which is not bad at all. Now I've been using the performance power levels. So that is the 65 watts peak that it gets up to. So if you're running on the balanced, it won't be as hot as this. You won't be seeing these kind of thermals. And I've been using that performance fan mode, which is a little louder. So here's a sample of it in the fan mode performance, which is the loudest, and stressed out with a stress test. So this is worst case scenario. Finally, Linux. Now to try and keep things short, I didn't end up doing a screen capture, but yes, Linux does work on this and you're able to run it. You have to disable the secure boot. So all up, it's a mini PC and a new brand that is very interesting. This has a lot of tech in it and the connectivity absolutely fantastic. 5 gigabit LAN ports, 2 of them, Wi-Fi 7. I don't even have a Wi-Fi 7 router yet because I can't justify the price of them. Considering the benefits that I'm going to get, I don't really think it's worth it just yet, but maybe in the future I'll be testing that out. Still, future-proof, very good. The touchscreen, it is nice to have to see some of the stats, but I don't really think it's absolutely necessary. However, on the fly, changing the power limit is the most useful feature of it. To change the power limit, the fan profile. So if you're sick of hearing the fan in the performance mode being a little loud, then just drop it into the eco or the balanced and it really chops down on the fan noise. Speaking of which, it's not bad in the balanced mode. In performance, you do hear it a little more. It's certainly not the loudest mini PC that I've tested, that I have covered, but it isn't the quietest either. I find it to be acceptable. It's not an offensive noise. Now, upgradability I would rate as being average because it's got a very small 20 to 30 sized SSD slot that is free, and those SSDs, They are both low in speed and well overpriced. 2 TB ones that I've just briefly looked at from, say, Corsair or something, costing around about 280 euros. Downright too expensive. And yes, this is an expensive model. So the downside is really that, probably the price of it, which I don't know yet exactly, but I've got my guesstimate and I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a super cheap unit, especially with that Ultra 9185H. Now, the integrated graphics is a big step up over Iris Xe from Intel, but it still falls short in some games. Like, for example, compared to, well, the current top dog of integrated graphics, which is still the Radeon 780M from AMD. A little bit better, so I'd love to see an AMD version of this mini PC. I think would be really good. Oculink performance, so what I saw testing out at least Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a huge difference, going from 89 frames per second from the fixed in-game benchmark using Thunderbolt or USB 4 to then having the RTX 4090 breathing a lot better with bandwidth, having a lot more versus the, say, in theory, 40 gigabits per second with USB 4, but it's only really about like 35 because there's some Thunderbolt overheads in there, USB 4 overhead. And then the Oculink being 63 gigabits per second, it did a lot better. It got then an average with the exact same settings, 4K, of 139 frames per second. Now, I do apologize for not having many Oculink or Thunderbolt tests and comparisons and all the bar graphs and everything like that. I didn't want this video to be too long. It already is far too long. But if there is the demand for it, if this video does well, then I may consider doing a more in-depth look at Thunderbolt Oculink with this unit here and this GPU that I did get for this video here. So all up, this mini PC offers a lot. It's high-end, it's going to be expensive. Their touchscreen is also very good. The portable touchscreen here, one of the best that I've seen lately. It's certainly going to replace my old 1080p touchscreen they have with a matte coating. The only thing is it's glossy, so it's quite reflective. But I like the brightness, and it can run just off a Type-C port. So that is the AtomMan X7 Ti. Thanks a lot for watching this review.